Unceded, undivided, torn apart but reunited.
Ani Wiikwemkoong, Carries Inouye Dijinakas, and welcome to the second episode of Aambe Giigididaa Wiikwemkoong. Let's talk Wiikwemkoong. Wow, yes, we made it to our second episode, and we want to say chimigwech to everybody who logged on to our Facebook page for the talk show and just did a like or had a little message. I really appreciate that. We all appreciate that. And again, we do have our Facebook visibility, so you got to check it out. But we'll have more details after the show. So for our second show, I want to introduce our guest. We have Brian Peltier, and we all know him. We all love him. The cultural programmer at Wiikwemkoong Heritage Organization here in Wiikwemkoong, or better known as the Who. Ani. Ani Shna. So what we're going to be talking about today, and we all know Brian specifically for this, and myself as well, is Anishinaabemowin and the importance of our language in our community. Not only, just, the present day and into the future, but we have to take a historical look at it as well as to how it really is the foundation of our people, the Anishinaabe. So Brian, we all know, does a lot of that information sharing, education, awareness across our community and outside of the borders of Wiikwemkoong as well. He does online virtual teachings as well and awareness. And we all know that he's also been active in our schools here in Wiikwemkoong and teaching our little ones. Because again, the present, they grow, they learn the language going into the future. So Brian, maybe if we just want to take a little look at that, when we're looking at Anishinaabemowin and our culture, the essence of that and the foundation.
Well, our language pretty well plays a big part of who we are. Not all of it, but it's a big chunk of who we are as Anishinaabe. It's how we express. We express what we see. We express what we know, what we feel, all those senses. So our language is very specific. It's a very strong context-based language, and it's spiritual to begin with, because we reference lots about the spirit. That's why we use Maba in our language, because it references your spirit, recognize your spirit or the spirit of that object, like a pipe. So we have to say that's Bogan Maba and you Kwe Maba. So that helps us determine the spirituality. Then when the settlers came in, it sort of made it that much more complicated of what the Anishinaabe understood, what is spiritual, and then what these new items these people brought across with them. Those words would stick. Let's say our little water boy drum, we call it Medewa kick. We always called it that kick because it retained water. And it's a spiritual item, that little boy water drum. So when the settlers came in, they had wooden pails and retained water. So it had that similarities to that. So that's what the Anishinaabe named that kick Maba. Even though that pail is a thing, it's that relation we have. That's what our knowing at the time. Anishinaabe saw all these new settlers come in, and that's what they saw and understood, believed in to be. This is the hard part, that animacy, because animacy, everything is also, because of in our language, is dependent on our philosophy. Our philosophy is a feminine one, because everything, well, it's creation. So women create. That way, it's that feminine part where creation, everything giving life. Life comes, even when the moon cracked. That's when the Creator decided to create everything. I saw all those colors, and those colors, what does it mean? What do colors mean? It means those elements, and elements is what we're all made of, to create life. Anishinaabe already knew that. So a lot of those colors is why colors are that animacy. And when things happened in the beginning, it was just darkness like this. Everything was calm. Then all of a sudden, change happened, movement happened. That change and that movement happened was the beginning of life. So that's why we see out there a car, it moves. Things that move gives it that animacy. Change is animate. It rains. Nibe, Vishmanda. As soon as it hits 0 degrees, what happens? Turns to ice. Kom, mob. So it's that Nishnaw's understanding that that change is part of our philosophy, and we have to start teaching that to people. That's a big part of our understanding of what life is. As Nishnawet, that's why I say the language expressing that will tell you like what certain things are in that what Mava, Magemanda. Because like it can change just like that animacy, because you'll have the strawberry, Demenmanda. But nowadays things have changed so drastically, someone could draw eyes on that. Then you're gonna have to say, Benabe or. So that's our understanding. That's how we say Benabe or. So you automatically that changes that animacy just like that. What Nishnawbe understands what life is, what characteristics. So that's that's what I mean, that's why I say it plays a big part of our way of thinking, our worldview. Because we're all connected to everything. And that's another thing why I say, Maba. A tree could be standing right there, and I say, which of on this? Maba, all. Same spirit as mine. My spirit is no greater than that tree or that rock. So that's how we understood our relationship with everything in all of creation as Nishnawbek. That how we are all interconnected with everything in the whole universe. And we're slowly losing that. It's very tough in this modern world. New technologies coming in, but we still have to keep in mind that we are all in this together, everybody.
So you mentioned, we're losing it, our language, but efforts are ongoing to rejuvenate or preserve the language as well, because it is key to our people. What would you say, you mentioned technology is really difficult and I guess posing a challenge. In what way does that pose a challenge for our language?
Well, it's everywhere. English is everywhere. If Ishnaben was everywhere, we'd probably have a better chance of retaining it. We don't hear it enough. It's not your fault you don't speak. It's what they done to us in the past that made us push it aside. Thing like we always heard this growing up that when what are you going to use this? And everybody believed in that. What are we going to use this for? But we realize we do need this. It's our connection is one of those gifts that the Creator gave. Sight was first, thought, and then to process that, you have to express that. So that expression really, I guess, communicating with the Creator first, foremost, because we're always so thankful all the time. Always think. That's why we give Sema every day. Say, Miigwech. Another beautiful day coming up again. Thank you. And we have a lot of all these other gifts that were given to us. What speech plays a big part of who we are to express that. And that with that speech comes with our way of thinking, and our way of thinking is not exactly how English would interpret their ways, but our ways is to how everything is connected. Our connection is key to all this.
And that's a really good point too, because how many times have you been asked, Brian, how do you say this? How do you say that? And it's not a verbatim, word for word translation.
No, it's not. It's
right.
Someone asks me something, I can express it. That's basically the closest I could say to saying something as well. We can say it, but it will be like a sentence. I have to say it in a sentence. That's why they say, how come those signs are so big? Because that's the only way I can express it. True. It's hard to try to put it into one word. Mm-hmm. It's very hard because it's lots of stuff. A lot of those words working with that dictionary and being in that lodge, hearing all those teachings in that lodge, now I know where that word came from. Right from the beginning, in the creation story, you hear about and then you start hearing that because that was that first thought. And that first thought we call gun, the shaker. And that mimics that sound of that first thought, and that first energy was that thought. So that's, you understand where the words come from, even when started stirring it up. That's why we always say, when things begin to happen. Then you hear that word, M-A-A-D-I, Maade. And that's everything that tells you what life is. So you understand where that word evolved from all through the creation story, even and what's in that word? Darkness. How do we see darkness? Nighttime, nakshik. What else you hear? Morning. That changed from darkness to light. That's where those words came from that action, what the Creator did. So that's how our words are started from there. So that's why I said it, in our language really tells where we came from, how things work, through our way of thinking. And it is very sight. It's a very visual language. As you always see us go like this. Ode, even that, ode. But you only need to do that when it's time to locate something. No matter what, this is part of our language too.
And when we're looking also in the history and how our language has started and evolved to where we are right now, huge concern is that we are losing a lot of our speakers, our elders who have spoken it throughout their entire life. We're losing them in the community, and that's a concern as well.
Mm-hmm. We stopped visiting. Technology has done that. It's not, you asked about technology. No, that's all we do now is communicate with that cell phone. Not like the old days growing up. I was lucky I was born at that era where there was no technology, no TV. All I heard was my parents speak and my grandparents living with them. So I heard the language every day. Visitors would come by, and all I heard was the language. Nowadays, you barely hear it. And visit an elder, myself, would be glad to speak it first instead of English. Any fluent speaker would rather speak their language first and then English. But you need to understand, and that's the other part us fluent speakers have to understand. We got to teach you and be very patient, with the fluent speakers, and to understand what we're trying to say. And then, basically people need to hear it pretty well every day if they want to speak the language every day and be dedicated to it. That has to be there. And visiting is the best part. You got probably family members that are fluent. Go and visit them. They'll be glad to speak to you. No one's going to be saying, "Oh, I'm not going to speak to you." No, they'll be glad to speak, because we rather speak that first as a fluent speaker and share that what we say before it's too late. I know we've been recording ourselves, and now we're working on that portal right now. And right now, we just finished the dictionary. Well, it's not done because now we're into the phrases, the expressions. Now, once we do all these expressions using those past, present, and future, you're going to start saying, "Oh, this was what else you need to put in that." It's just that dictionary is just going to grow even more. Like you're going to have to, the tenses, it'll say here, like that, let's say Josh already, or gone, Ja, like going, gone, go, going, went. That all has to go in that root word Ja. It's in that movement, but it's dependent on those tenses that are in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it's, like I said, it's also very speaker-orientated because I'm going to be speaking. And where I'm at, that's where you start seeing all those little preverbs, they call them, like be, ne, me. And that means Gubishana, Gubisha. Ganasha no da, Ganasha Geni. That means those movement of the language moves that way too. That's why they call it living language. Because it moves in all directions. That's why the hummingbird was the first one to speak and gave that voice to Anishinaabe. Then that's why it's the only bird that moves backwards. So that's part of what people don't never heard the creation story will understand, where all these gifts and all these clans play into our daily lives. All those gifts they gave to us. Your clan, like everything from being honesty, calmness, like the deer, like that's my clan. That's your integral part, and you mimic how that deer lives, and that's you. We believe in that. And like I said today, like nobody talks about that. It was taboo back then. You couldn't talk about it. So it wasn't your fault, because our people were even more oppressed than we are today back then, in sharing or in passing down that knowledge. And we have to start passing down that knowledge before it's too late. We have to tell everybody these stories, these teachings, and share them for the next generation to understand that. It has to happen, because somewhere down the line there was that blockage because of all the oppression we faced as a people, and people kept it to themselves. Oh, you can't talk about that. You can't talk about that. That's all I heard when growing up too sometimes, but we had to talk about it when we're out in the bush or late at night when my grandmother would talk about it. Or now, when we're in these ceremonies, now the lodges are all back, the rain dance, sun dance, Medeo, and now we're not out in the bush or way out there. Now we're out by the ballpark. We're all in the open. There's lodges, you can see them out in town by the road, so we're not afraid anymore. We're told, go out there and do your work, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
And when you're speaking about doing the work, that's ongoing. You've been a part of it for years in the community. And you're really meeting a lot of different levels of knowledge as far as Anishinaabe goes. Say for myself, somebody my age, where I wasn't really brought up on the language, but I'm trying to learn it as, as a middle age or whatever. I'm not going to say my age. But then you also have the opportunity to go and work with the little ones, and I know you have your puppets and that sort of thing. So they're learning right from being tiny. So you see the differences at the different levels with the different ages as far as learning the language. Do you see the challenges with that, or the opportunities?
It's easier with the kids. They're like sponges, and I remember seeing a kid, and she remembered one time, it was like maybe 6 months ago, but she says she remembered that story I told her just like it was yesterday. So it sticks to them, because when I tell a story, I got to use all my body to teach it, like how my grandfather used to always act, even manjimaba. So I had to do the same thing, because you got to keep that kid focused too, to lose their attention, and they're very fascinated about the start teachings. They just love hearing about the Lungo Suck, all the stories about that, and how we're related, and just by say, well, start out with your eye. What does it look like? So I show them, here's a picture of the universe, what does it look like? And they said, oh, my eye. Exactly. So you know where you came from. I know where you came from. You came from up there. So they like that right off the bat. You got them hooked. Then I bring in my little puppets, and I say, here's the story about the otter, Nigik. And they love that, all the 4 directions. I taught them that. See, and they don't forget that. They'll remember that, but like I said, maybe next year I have to tell them that again, over and over again, so it sticks to them, and that way they can tell that story later on. So that's a big key. But adults, it's harder. It's harder. You're gonna have to, like yourself, probably go through these things 10 times to fully understand especially when it's done in the language. Because there's a big difference saying creation story than when I say Bigi Matkamagok. It doesn't really say creation story. I'm telling you when things begin to happen. There's a big difference in trying to put that in English, and how I express that English word creation story. I express it as Bigi Matkamagok. That's our understanding when things began. So that's a little bit difficulty for yourself, but a little kid can say, okay, we'll absorb that, I understand that. It's easier for them to pick that up, and it's easier for them to pick up words, I find.
And it is a challenge, right? So with me in the community, working in the communications sector in the community, a lot of what we do as far as promotions or communicating with our community, we want the translated version. We want the translation of certain words or phrases and meanings. And we do come to people like yourself. I know I've knocked on your door many times to ask you how do we translate this. So it's really good to see that we're really pushing that in the community. And you mentioned earlier we should be proud. We're proud now. We're not hiding anymore.
No.
Our people. And this is an example of that and all the work that we're doing. And we're now putting those words out on our marquee boards in the community, on our documents, that we, and even with this show here, I did come to you and we talked about, what the meaning of the show would mean. And there are different meanings, right? So it was a learning experience for myself. So I'd like to know, in our community, would you say, are we doing things right when it comes to language rejuvenation, preservation, teaching?
We're getting there. Like I said, there's a language nest now here in the community. Down in Wiikwemkoong thing, so that's a big start right there. You got over 50 fluent speakers there helping out. I know it's too bad we're in this bad time right now where we can't have more. It's making it difficult on us, but they're still chugging along and still doing it. The schools are doing more. Like I said, we're going into the schools, myself going in there to go and teach. I bring in some elders going there to come and sing our songs, and the lodges have returned home. I guess for many years they were gone. Now they went back to all these guys, these people went out and came back and brought it back home, and now they're doing the work, and it's slowly building up. These lodges where all that knowledge is, healing, a lot of healing going on right now of all the trauma we have faced, and that tells you that we're heading the right direction. But like I said, people can't be complacent and say, "Oh, maybe next time." There might not be a next time. We don't know how much the elders that could pass on, and you not be able to hear the story, especially in the language. It's getting harder. There's not much of us that can tell the creation story in the language no more, and you got to hear the creation story in the language to fully feel it, understand what it really means as compared to English. Like everybody uses that word, medicine wheel. And then I heard people, but that does not mean that. It's just an object, but that's not. It means more. But if people understood what the creation story is and all that is, and you have to hear that creation story when that moon opened up. You walk out, wow, oko, and that's the correct what they is to say in the language right there. Okoe. Imoko come. He said, you walk out, and all those colors come out. So they call that true meaning of that medicine. You say walk out, that's what it is that where those colors come into play, and those colors, like I said, have meaning. And it tells us everything about all those directions, because there's different meanings of hope, time, belonging, meaning, and purpose. Because a lot of people never heard about when man was lowered and he got his final instructions. It was all those medicines that sent him off. When he did that full teachings, it was that binds everything together. So which plant binds everything together? What is it? What are the sacred medicine we have that is intertwined together like this? The braided one. What is that?
Sweetgrass.
Sweetgrass, Winglish. So it was Winglish that gave the final instructions, because what does Winglish represent? What does North represent? Wisdom. Binds everything together. All of those teachings, including meaning. In order you understand the meaning, then you become wise. So that's your purpose. Purpose to understand that and to act on those. So when man was lowered down, the final instructions given to him is a pretty powerful one. He says, "Kataben dago set, kawe wo kataben si, Net the way with the ben man, when me can, one the English me can one other way. So what I said in English, you will own nothing, you'll be part of everything. The only thing you'll own will be that red road. And so now was his human bore down as that tree bent down like this, send him away. So you have to hear that part of the Christian story to fully understand why we are here. It's to follow that red road. And that's the only thing you own is, this is my life. I'm going to run that. You spend this stuff in the language, it means a lot more as compared to saying in English. Then you'll understand why it plays a big part of who we are.
And that means a lot when you say that you own nothing, but you're a part of everything, you know.
Yep.
And again, we're talking about what we're doing right now in the community and what you do and our other speakers in the community do. And youth is important, an important part of that rejuvenation and
Yep.
carrying the language on. If you had a message for our youth and our community, what would that be when it comes to the language, and why, if they were said, well, why should I care?
Like I said, it plays a big part of who you are as a Dishtabe. So, and for us too, as fluent speakers, we got to speak to you in the language. And you got to take time and listen and ask. Don't be scared to ask. When you say to me, what does that mean? Or say, say it again. And like I said, a fluent speaker will never back down and say, okay, they'd rather speak the language more than anything else. Ask, visit. I think I strongly recommend youth to visit their grandparents, parents who speak, aunts or uncles or neighbors, relatives. Speak to me in the language. We'll be glad to say it in language and get you to understand that. So, and you'll realize how incredible our language really is and how it defines everything, how everything works, our relationship with that spirit, and how that we identify something or how that works, or in relation to how that came to be. Because a lot of stuff we realize that working with the language and then hearing all these teachings, and I say, wow, that's what it really means. Like a simple one is if you see a garter snake, you call it a garter snake, right? If you saw it, with what's the distinguishing thing about the garter snake?
The lines on the back.
What do we
Right.
call that? Bepeshigneb. Bepeshigneb.
Bepeshignebik.
Yeah, that tells you it has multiple markings. That's the snake, so that's what it really means. The one with the multiple markings. The nebik that's on the ground. Snake, so garter snake doesn't tell you much. But Bepeshignebik is the one with the markings, multiple markings.
It's a description.
Yeah.
In the language, it describes it. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I said, always said that our language is very descriptive. Like English only has that word hot. I'll use that as an example. But I can say, I'm hot. But if that, let's say that stove is hot, oh, shopkede. But if you go outside, gishate. But if you go inside, oh, gishade, won't be bintik. So you have to use only that word when you're outside, that one inside. And if I'm hot or if that stove is hot, you're going to have to use that word. Those suffixes will change on each one. So that's why I said that's a real good example of how specific the language is where we use it. Not just one. That's not like English. So people have to understand that. And that's why I said it's such a great language. It tells you a lot.
And you always tell me practice.
Yeah.
Practice.
saying those words. Our sounds are different from English.
Right.
The writing system
Right.
is different from English. Like you'll see an A, but
Yeah.
our A is not the same as an A.
Yeah.
We don't say A in the language. Or A. We say as in up.
Yeah.
It's dumb. That's why I said you need to make it simple for them to look instead of saying A. That letter A as in up. That's how you'll sound out like umik. amic, not amic.
Right.
Amic.
And I think that's where I have
Yeah.
a lot, I noticed myself a lot because I was English and I learned French.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different tone. It's so different. So when you're always trying to teach me these words, and I have the hardest time because I'm used to, like you said, the A's and the higher sounding
Yeah.
words. So sometimes I do struggle I don't know how to lower or, change my tone.
It's harder here.
It's difficult.
It's harder here because you have three
Yeah.
dialects here, and they're all intertwined.
They are.
But it's a strong Odawa sound. So by Odawa now, it's the nasal, like that N M. Like I'll use that nja, nja dogo. Doesn't necessarily I, but that's just how we sound here. Gee. All that nasal sounds come to play as us Odawas have, and it's very strong nasal base we use here, and it's not in that writing system. You want to write it the Ojibwe without the nasal, so you won't hear different. There's a difference now in how it's written, but if you hear me say it, so you start hearing that nasal sound, but it's not in that written form. So that's another difficult part. Well, some people will understand it, and sometimes I make the mistake. Oh shucks, I'm not supposed to put that N in there, but that's just how I hear it when I say it sometimes.
And I do realize that too. And I've shown my mother the written forms of certain words. She'll look at the words and she doesn't really understand because she has spoken it her entire life, but to see it written down, that's a whole different world because now that's what we're doing. We're writing it down, right? So I find that interesting as well. It's making that connection. It's very different. It's a learning process.
It's difficult. It's not our
Yeah.
writing system.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
they have certain rules for their writing system, and like ZHSH equals SH. That's how they do. That came in there, but we do have that ZHSH also, like as in niche. You hear that ZHSH in there, just like then you say nishing, like that, and you start hearing those sounds, that ZH, and then we realize, hey, that tells you that thing is you're talking about somebody, so it animate. And that animacy comes into play with certain sounds, even that W has been dropped quite a bit. People say, bo, but it's really wa, bo. Because bo is bent.
Yeah.
It's bent. That's what we understand, but we understand that it's because of English. The English can't say those words. So we've been heavily influenced by the English language, and that's a lot of part of that English sound system as we have when we talk. So it's that much. It's hard. It makes it that much harder. Like there's some sounds like that EW sound. What we write, it's hard. It's not you, new, but it's L. Like in Chimeoja. So it's not in that English sounds. Even that mach-ki, that guttural sound, mach, not mach-ki, mach-ki. So you start hearing that sounds that we have, but I said, well, we're just gonna have to say it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's just beautiful when you bring out the difference. So and I think that's really key here too. Is don't give up. The message here is don't give up on learning the language. Yes, there may be challenges, whether it's age, whether it's access to teachers. The way it used to be, we're challenged now with COVID, and now everything is online or at a distance. And it could be challenging because we have our little devices, and that takes us away from it. So if there was a message, not to give up, other ways or the many ways that you can learn the language. If you don't have access to sit with somebody, what would that message be?
We're working on it. So we're looking at, I asked a person, how did you learn to speak German, Japanese? He says, well, grammar came last. I just wanted to communicate when I get over there. So basically, phrases, right? He says, yes. I want to say, good morning. How are you today? Things like that. And then they added on their vocabulary that way. But ours is different because you don't want to approach it towards the English because he's like I said, you got to understand what is Mav and Manda too, in order to speak it correctly. Instead of just saying it's the difference between apples and oranges, our language, because that Shim is a Mava and this orange is a Manda. You got to know that. You just start using that word. There's, you're going to have to use different words to say to eat this and to eat that. So that's how we're going to start, and then just have two people talking because you want to converse and you want to understand what's saying and have different emotions. What in case someone's angry, this is how you're going to respond. Or whatever, you know, things like that. Just to say that, but it's just how it is, and it is fun, and we're having a lot of fun there at the office doing that, and just saying, well, I could say this too, like that, and then Jack would say, oh, you want the bucket. So we're having now is the fun part of doing that, the portal, but that portal is only one tool. It's not going to be the tool, and the language nest is another tool. Schools is another tool. Visiting someone, talking to someone in the community is another tool. So you're going to have to put these all together to learn, but that person has to try several hours, more than several hours a day to really understand the language and keep at it. Like there's apps out there now to help you, and I think we're going to start swinging towards doing more programming in the language, like cooking shows, for example, and animation to hear more in the language so people can hear it instead of like, this is one tough, because there's hardly anything out there in media that has our language out there. So that's the avenue we're trying to go to help people learn. Because you probably want to learn, you don't wonder what they're saying when they're cooking that, whatever, making scone or something. So they'll help you learn the language. So that's the avenue we're going to use technology to help just as well. But it's not the same as being with a person. That's probably the best way to learn with an actual living human being, to hear them speak the language. Probably number one, but if we aren't able to do that, so they're going to have to start doing other forms to have access to that language. It's all about the exposure. If you're going to learn the language, you need to be exposed to it.
And it could be fun.
Yeah, it is.
Learning the language could be fun.
It is fun, yeah.
Even if you mess it up a little bit, it's good. Have a laugh and, just keep on going. And you'll remember that, right?
Yeah.
Right. So thank you very much for sharing. I know that's a topic that we can probably talk more about. You probably need a lot of time to talk about, everything that you had mentioned. We just skimmed on the surface, but we just wanted to bring this out in the community because it's one of our priorities, and even Chief and Council have mentioned it's a priority, for our community and our language. So Chimigwech for sharing your insight as you always do with us, Brian. So again, right, I guess the message is that don't be afraid. Talk to your relatives, speak the language as much as possible. There's all sorts of opportunities to learn the language as well, and you can contact Brian and others at Wiikwemkoong Heritage Organization and even the band office. We have a program at the band office as well. So don't be afraid, don't be shy. Like we said, we can mess up a little bit and have a little bit of fun. So, miigwech, everybody, for joining us for this episode with Brian Peltier and Anishinaabe in our community. You can contact myself through the show. Our email address is wut-talkshow@wiikwemkoong.ca. And again, the WHO, your phone number, contact directly is
705-859-2385.
Right. So you can contact Brian again or the other staff down at the WHO. So again, miigwech for viewing, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And don't forget to check out our Facebook page as well. Aambe Giigididaa Wiikwemkoong. Easy to find. I think it's easy to find now. Miigwech.
Aambe.